I just reviewed 20 TED Talks on creativity and noticed a pattern among all 20. And this short videotape segment is about that. I think it's an interesting topic. Um, you would expect, for a lot of reasons, that treatment of creativity on the web would be very unsatisfying and largely nothing beyond common sense that we all already have. You would suspect that because 90% of the books on creativity are flaky little game things, and they're really just about how to make a group feel creative because business is so foolish. That's what they want to pay for. Business thinks that people who feel creative are creative. It never occurs to them that testing light bulb material 8009, testing light bulb material 8010, testing light bulb material 8011, like Thomas Edison did, doesn't feel the least bit creative. Only an absolute nut would torture himself through 9,000, 10,000 of those tests before they finally found one. Only a maniac would have hoped that after 9,000, 10,000 failures, that 10,001 would turn out to be a filament that would change the world. That's Edison. So the big home run kinds of creativity, they don't feel creative at all. They feel quite the opposite. And any businessman or CEO or vice president who thinks otherwise is a fool and is not going to get anything but tiny, tiny little base hits. And so you go across 90% of the books published, and they're all in the ballpark of techniques and tools and methods for feeling creative. Then you can go to places like IDEO, which is supposed to be one of the most creative companies in the world, and look at them pulling out brainstorming methods. The typical, stereotypical, put the forest ranger on the brainstorming team, and that'll surprise everybody and give new perspectives. If you're a 6-year-old elementary school student, that probably is, it makes your brainstorm feel creative. It's the same delusion. IDEO is just absolutely lost. And then you go from IDEO to the D School at Stanford, and they've got rooms with video cameras on everything, on the toys, on the waste paper basket, on the blinds, on the ceiling, on the floor, on the table, on the typewriter, on the whiteboard. And they've videotaped for 30 years now groups brainstorming and learned absolutely nothing and published damn near nothing. And what they've learned about design during those 30 years would fill a very small 100-page book in terms of articles worth me keeping. Now, maybe you have lower standards and you want 500 of their articles, but I don't want you in my classes if you were impressed by that stuff, because it's pretty commonsensical stuff, the stuff that's not just clearly invalid. So there's a whole delusional trend through Santa Clara County and San Francisco and Napa Valley and of people there too who got suckered into anything you do that makes people feel creative must be creative. So, that's principle one. Number two is critical listening. Whenever you're listening to a TED Talk about creativity, close your eyes and hear that voice and those words and those ideas and tell yourself that the source that I'm now hearing is not at all famous. It's just an old friend of mine across the table at dinner, or somebody I happened to meet in a lounge at a business class flight somewhere, or somebody I met on the bus or subway or train or something. And nothing famous about them. A friend across the way in a bar in Roppongi talking to me about his ideas or her ideas. And once you subtract out the famousness of the source and just listen to the ideas as if they came from anybody, see whether there's any value or at all amazement that remains. Do that yourself before you listen to my reaction. I've done it, and I've had my students do it, and it's an amazing test. I've even done it with a control group where I took random idiots and non-college educated, college educated, and had them speak theories of creativity of their own invention and out of the world's best research books, and tested them with these famous voices on TED Talk. And I got an absolute random relationship. I got it's not really my idea. I think Johnny Carson it was who put winos at the intersection of Wilshire and some street in downtown Los Angeles behind a table to judge wine quality. And then I had wine critics in his studio lined up behind a table, gave them all the same 5 wines to put in order of quality, and the winos beat the wine critics. It's something like that. So uh, the 99% of the books out there, and I keep changing the percentage, 90% of the books out there, and all 20 of the TED Talks that I reviewed yesterday evening on creativity uh, are firmly in the camp of wrongly selling you the idea that anything that makes a group feel creative makes them creative. And number two, if you listen to all those TED Talks with your eyes closed and tell yourself that the voice is just an ordinary person across the table from you, uh, any serious impression from the ideas just goes away immediately, evaporates to nothing. I don't know anybody who couldn't beat the quality and interest of those ideas from the TED Talks. So, and then now let's think about that. If that's true, okay, you don't have to believe it's true, but do your own experiment and make your own decision on it. If that's true for you, the way it certainly is true for me last night, I had to ask myself, why is that so? Now, these are manifestly creative people. So number one, there's this study on hit songs done about 2 years ago, very well done statistically, smart professors. And they found that hit songs were randomly chosen from other songs. And there's absolutely nothing culturally, socially, musically, hip hop in any way stylistic, fashionably different about the number 200 song a year and the number 2 song a year and the number 100 song and the number 1 song a year. No musical lyrics, contemporariness, edginess, none of those, no differences. And so which one became number 200, which one became number 2 was done by luck, a pure path-dependent luck process. And they gave good examples in their paper of a DJ whose stomach hurt. So he delayed going to lunch a few minutes and played one song longer than he usually does. And instead of putting on an ad, he put on this one last song. And instead of putting on a normal song he had planned, he put one of the input pile. And there are a couple on the input pile that had sort of interested him label and word wise. He hadn't heard them yet. And he just took one that had an interesting image on the label, played it for 3 minutes. And it just so happened that a movie director who had thrown out some music for background for a scene heard that as he was doing something and thought, that's the sound that I want, and then called the station to find out what was being played so that he could find the guy who produced that music, and then all sorts of, and boom, it ends up a hit. Now, we don't know. No one's done the research, so we don't know what proportion of creative works are path-dependent luck processes like that. But it may be 50%, it may be 30%, it may be 80%. If so, if that's a significant percent, then you have a lot of creative people whose explanations of their own creativity are amateurish, useless, and boring because their creativity is mostly a luck reaction. Something that shouldn't have surprised many people ended up surprising many people because of a concatenation of rare events. And so that might be one, that might explain a portion of it. Number two, there's some research by Hargadon and some other guys which have shown that inventors of anything, music, lyrics, songs, dances, rocket ships, whatever, tend to be one-trick ponies. I mean, they get one really, really good idea in their life, and they get really, really excited when they find it. And then they sort of find 28, 30 different places to apply it for the next 30 years. And to others, because the context can be so wild, they may not notice the analogy between what they did 2 years ago over here in chemical engineering and now what they're doing in dance. But the inventor themselves, they get the analogy. And they know if you talk to them carefully and honestly, or maybe after 3 glasses of wine, they'll admit that this is the same old thing back there from chemical engineering just transposed into the world of dance. And so you end up with these one-trick ponies applying this one great idea in many different frameworks, and which keep amazing the audiences because each of those frameworks has a different audience. They each judge it independently as creative given their framework. So it looks like a person is creative 28 times, but actually it's one idea applied in 28 wild different frameworks. So it's a great mapper and analogy finder is what these inventors end up being. And then so that would explain why they can't give much of an explanation, because their actual amount and type of creativity is quite specific and narrow. and not nearly as broad in general as you or others may have the impression of. And then there's a third idea, which is um, everybody wants to feel that they already are creative because they've created their own self, and now self is a very complicated thing, and regardless of its quality, it feels creative to you and me because we get to choose what we want to eat tonight and choose something different than we ate tomorrow. However, that's a kind of gross exaggeration of how creative we are, and uh, therefore uh, that may be another explanation for why the 20 TED Talks that I looked at last night were enthrallingly empty, thrillingly moronic, boringly similar. Um, and then there's a fourth element, which is the Sinatra effect, I call it, which is the I did it my way. And everybody presents their way of being creative. And, you know, if someone asked me to give a talk on creativity, I would be embarrassed to just talk about my creativity and doing it my way. I would include at least one other person's way and a different kind of creativity than my own, and then try to link my very limited little tiny slice and way of creativity with some of the 40, 50,000 other ways of being creative in the world, and why I hadn't done those and why I had ended up doing this one and which one I probably should branch out into next. And so I found that these TED guys willing to talk for 17, 22 minutes just about their one way and never showing any relationship to or versions of other people's ways or contrasting their way with someone else's way of being creative, I found that rather narcissistic. And Americans are, in perhaps their civilization is degenerated to that kind of narcissism, but I don't find it polite. I don't find that intellectually balanced. And I don't find it thrilling to listen to. And I get a little bit tired of my way stuff. And if Richard Green gives you a talk on creativity, you're going to be pretty sure it's not just his way. I don't even have a book on my model of creativity. I have a book on 60 models of creativity. I don't even have an encyclopedia article on my model of creativity. I have an encyclopedia on an article on 120 of other people's models of creativity. And I do that just because I know I'm limited.